Let's switch focus to the other side of Capitol Hill. A key member of the House of Representatives joining us now, Illinois Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger. Congressman, thanks for joining us.
You bet, Wolf. Thanks for having me.
And you served in both Iraq and Afghanistan as well. You didn't support Donald Trump, but today you came out with this statement. Let me read a sentence or two from the statement that you put out. I applaud our President-elect Donald Trump and look forward to working with his administration in Congress. As a country, we must look at this election as an opportunity to rally together to move our country forward. You've been in disagreement with Trump's international stances on several issues. As you know, he's vowed to diminish the U.S. commitment to NATO unless the NATO allies pay a whole lot more, wants to rip up NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. If he does these kinds of things, will you support him?
Well, look, I'll be very supportive of Donald Trump in areas where I agree, but just as I was elected to do to represent the 16th District of Illinois, I will, no matter who's president, stand strong for what I think is a strong U.S. foreign policy, strong commitment to NATO, pushing back against Russian encroachment in Europe and elsewhere, solving the situation in Syria. I'm supportive now of Donald Trump as president because we have an opportunity to do a lot of great things, and I'm excited about that. But I will continue to stand strong when it comes to issues like foreign policy. And I'll tell you, the moment you get elected as president, I guess, I've obviously never been elected as president, but there is a huge weight of the world that comes onto your shoulders. And now it goes from, in theory, where you're having a campaign, to in reality, where you realize things like Syria and Russia, there's people's lives on the line, and you're now the one everybody is looking at. So I would assume and hope that as he's beginning his transition, he's really studying these issues, and I'll continue to be there to help him through them if he asks. And
he's now getting these daily national security intelligence briefings as well from, indeed, the most secret, the most classified information. A lot of people in the administration right now are hoping that over the course of the next 2.5 months, as he gets these briefings, maybe his views on some of these sensitive issues will modify, will change, if you will. I want to get your thought. You did not support Trump during the campaign. A Trump surrogate, the Apprentice star Omarosa, she said that the Trump campaign is keeping a list of enemies. You said you couldn't support Trump during the campaign. Do you think you might be on that so-called list of enemies?
Maybe. I'm on a lot of people's enemies lists, I'm sure, all over the place. No, look, I'm excited. And I think, the night of the election, there's a lot of emotion. People are upset. You get some of the Trump supporters that were upset with me. I understand it. I mean, I've had to live that every day. And, you have people that are upset. And so in that emotion, it's kind of like, okay, it's time for some payback. But I think the next morning, and this is how I feel today, it's like this is an opportunity to unify the country. First, Trump's job, if he wants to have a legacy and pass some big things, which I hope he does and believe he does, he's going to have to unify his party. And then secondly, we're going to have to unify the country. We're going to have to reach across the aisle to Democrats and say, look, hey, we want to work on things like tax reform or work on the national deficit or how do we get an infrastructure bill and how, all these big issues. And we'd love to have some Democratic buy-in, not just for politics, but it's good for the American people because, like with Obamacare in 2009 and 10, there was no Republican support for that. And it was an albatross around the president's neck for many years after. I think the way to do good government, even if you have all the levers of government, is to do your best to reach to the other side of the aisle. You may not always find agreement, but I think you always ought to try to find agreement.
Do you believe that Donald Trump, he has said he wants to get together with the Republicans in addition to Democrats, he says, and independents? Do you actually think a Trump White House will embrace you, reach out to you, and try to work with you?
Well, that's on them. I'm not going to go out and beg for it. I understand everything. But I am committed to unifying this party. I am committed to supporting the areas of Donald Trump that he wants to move forward with our agenda. Again, as I said, no matter who was president, whether it was Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump, or somebody else, I'll continue to stand strong on issues of national defense and speak out for the voiceless, for instance, in Syria that are taking barrel bombs every day from helicopters, indiscriminately bombing them, or the Russians doing the same. So I'm going to continue to be as bold and aggressive as a congressman as I have always tried to be, and that's up to the Trump campaign or the Trump president-elect, I guess, infrastructure now, but I am there to support the next president in every way I can.
And national security, just very quickly, are you with Donald Trump and Senator Cotton, for that matter, when it comes to waterboarding?
Well, I agree to an extent with Senator Cotton on that, whereas in extreme times, it ought to be an option. But I think when it comes to waterboarding, it's not something we ought to revert to in the very first case. He is true. We do use enhanced interrogation techniques, what are so-called enhanced interrogation techniques, against even, when I go through survival training with the military, for instance. So I think it ought to be a tool in the pocket, but I don't think anybody would advocate, and I certainly wouldn't advocate, using that and much worse as kind of a frontline way to get intelligence. We actually see that the best way to gather intelligence is through developing a relationship with whoever you're interrogating. Frankly, that's what breaks people more than anything.
Do you see the House Speaker Paul Ryan keeping his speakership in a Trump presidency?
I do, and I certainly hope so. I think it would be really beneficial for that endorsement of Paul Ryan to be made. I support him. I think Paul Ryan and Donald Trump have had some probably really good conversations since. And again, if I'm in Donald Trump's position, my goal now is to say, okay, we have to achieve some big things, and the infighting in the party that's been very real has got to stop, and we have to unify around these principles. And so I think Paul Ryan survives. He definitely has my support, and I think the party can move forward united.
As I said earlier, you're an Iraq War veteran. Trump said he knows more about ISIS than the generals do. Do you think he really has a plan in mind? He won't reveal it. Do you think he knows more how to defeat ISIS than the generals do?
I don't think anybody knows more than our generals in terms of strategies, tactics, and bringing in State Department to understand building alliances outside of just kinetic military action and how groups interact and what groups you can support. My guess is in the heat of the campaign, that's just something that was said. But I think he understands that, look, he wants to defeat ISIS. What are we doing that works? What are we doing that hasn't worked? What next steps do we need to take? And I fully expect President-elect Trump will convene the people that know all this the best, whether it's the diplomatic side, whether it's the military side, and come up with a plan to crush this cancer and be on the alert for the next iteration of ISIS that's certain to come eventually.
You think the U.S. military would support a Trump plan? We don't know what the Trump plan would be, but let's say he comes up in the first 100 days with a Trump plan that is not necessarily conventional. You think the military over at the Pentagon, the Joint Chiefs, would automatically support what their commander-in-chief tells them to do?
Yeah, that's their job. And, they work for the commander-in-chief. They defend the Constitution. Obviously, still being in the military, these men and women are heroes, and they'll do what they're told. When it comes to the Joint Chief level, obviously they'll give the president some input, some pushback when developing that plan. But ultimately, we understand as military members, and when I'm on military status, that I work for the commander-in-chief, and the commander-in-chief sets the policies. Look, there's a lot of stuff President Obama has done overseas in military that the military kind of shakes their head at and say, why are we doing things this way, or why aren't we taking the fight more to the enemy somewhere else? But they act heroically no matter who that is, and that's what's great about our country. We have civilian leadership of our military. We don't worry about coups like you see in other countries, and we have a peaceful, great transition, power transition that'll occur. And both candidates, by the way, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, gave very humble and frankly inspiring speeches, and I was glad to see that.
And Ash Carter, the Secretary of Defense, wrote a letter today, a memorandum to all Defense Department employees, civilian and military, saying, I am committed to overseeing the orderly transition to the next commander-in-chief, promising to work very closely with Donald Trump, the president-elect of the United States. Congressman, thanks very much for joining us.
You bet, Wolf. Thanks a lot. Take care.